Alright everyone, the liberals are big mad. Starting off today with talking about the Rose City nationalists getting shoved aside by some conglomerate of people that were holding a little rally there. I believe this is in Oregon specifically. And they're waving flags, and some of it looks like libertarian ideology appears to be there, and MAGA, and some Proud Boys actually as well. So civ-nats and people who are populistic getting together to rally. And some Nazis showed up, as in supposed Nazis. As in, they're all wearing masks for a reason and seemed very, very upset when those masks were torn off. And by the way, this is probably the most effective tactic going forward, demasking, to deal with the fact that every time that two or more gathered in the name of populism, libertarianism, civ-nats, any outside ideology that has any sort of viability whatsoever and could be palatable to the public, something that could replace the dying neolib neocon system that we've got. Every time that happens, a bunch of people with swastika flags seem to show up. They always seem to know where it's happening, and they always insinuate themselves into the situation. Then they raise trouble. Some of these people are federal agents. In fact, somebody's speculating that one of the demasked individuals, you can check out the link in the description. We'll get to Kinzinger in a moment because he's got perhaps the funniest take on this that I've seen so far. The liberals are angered by this. At least one of the individuals appears to have been ID'd. I'm just going to say that that's alleged because I can't confirm that the individual that was demasked in the photo there in the still actually is the self-admitted member of the U.S. government that is there. I can't determine that. Of course, you can have 5 or 6 people that look basically the same in a given geographical area, and it's sort of like doing a crime sketch. Just because suspect B appears to look very similar to the sketch doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to end up indicted at all, because it could be if there's somebody else in the lineup that looks remarkably similar. So we'll hold off on that judgment, but the idea that these groups, that they have their uniforms, the tan slacks or however, and the black masks and so forth, the idea that these groups have not been infiltrated at the very least, if not founded by glowing ones, is preposterous if you look at the relatively recent history of the U.S. legal system. The Klan was infiltrated. Now, the Ku Klux Klan was not originally founded by feds. It was founded in part by disaffected Southerners, people, in some cases they had slaves, or there was retaliation by them for what happened under Reconstruction. There was a lot of overreach by the new incoming Union bosses that came down to southern states that were deprived of their actual civic system at all in some cases. Some of them weren't even allowed to vote in elections if they didn't go along with what was going on as far as the reformative period post-Civil War. And so some people, they started doing their night rides and burning crosses and terrifying black people, and also going after carpetbag politicians from the north that were sent down there to abuse the population. They weren't feds. But over time they got infiltrated by them. By the era of the Tommy gun toters, it's unthinkable that there weren't Fed assets monitoring what they were doing. These days, the feds are much more proactive. Relatively small groups, Rose City nationalists, I guess these people are called. The idea that there's not at least a couple of federal agents there is completely horseshit. You have to be an idiot to believe that. So they go out, and keep in mind, these are taxpayer-funded individuals within the FBI or the sheriff's office or something. They're actually going and attempting to stymie political rallies. Also, Antifa is involved. Far leftists are more than happy to dress up as neo-Nazis in order to go and tarnish the name of populism. Because the system is afraid of populism. It's afraid of the actual upswelling of reform-minded Americans right now who realize that the current system does not work. Now, how that system is replaced is up for further debate. Leftists want to replace it. It's just that they have a tendency to knock off vulnerable Democratic congresspeople like AOC. So they hire actresses basically to go in and campaign against them. They raise some investment money, which is really, really funny that they're getting money from a bunch of rich people and they knock them off that way. Populism has MAGA. So Trump, to an extent, MAGA light with DeSantis or something. Ramaswamy would roughly fit in there at this point, I suppose. Libertarianism is a viable alternative, at least in its softer classical liberal form, to the current hegemon of neocon neolib incorporated. Civnats, of course, the concept of going back to the Hail Columbia eras, not exactly extreme. Your great-grandparents were very familiar with it. It's not exactly ancient history. It's not that long ago. It's like the 20s and 30s and shit like that. I love watching this because the so-called Nazis caught a beatdown, but now we'll go to Kinzinger and what he said with regards to this. Now keep in mind, Adam Kinzinger, former congressperson, severe TDS, he clearly fucking hates populism almost as much as he hates Orange Man. Here was his hot take on it, and this is very, very strange to hear from somebody who walked the halls of Congress. These people, so referring to the video, which you can watch if you want to, these people, all blue checks. Oh my god. Terrible. $8 a month, Adam. You're too cheap to afford it, apparently. Oh, that's right. You get like a congressional pension at this point. Come on, you can cough up the $8 a month so that somebody will actually see what you're posting outside of your echo chamber. There's a reason he doesn't want that. Are celebrating a seemingly MAGA assault on federal officers. Now, I don't know what this really is, but take a gander at the comments of the patriots who love America. Dude, if a bunch of taxpayer-funded thugs are dressing up as Nazis in order to go and attempt to interfere with completely lawful political speech, so these people are just gathered on the street corner waving U.S. flags, why are you whining about them being demasked? By the way, they approached the other people there first, so, you know, they were the ones that were getting heated, and the people told them to fuck off, and they refused to fuck off, so several of them got their masks removed. Oh, how sad. They were so injured. My poor feds. Adam Kinzinger, who's probably acutely aware of the fact that Fed influence and subversion happens in such movements at any given date, appears to understand what's going on here. Again, I can't confirm that any of the demasked individuals are feds. They could also be Antifa, that's possible. Or they could genuinely be Nazis. Or they could be mentally, there's something wrong with them. And so they're not really political ideologues. They're just trying to find some friends to fit in with. I have a feeling that that's fairly common among extreme groups as well. Look at communism. There's a reason that it's a sausage fest. But there are feds there. The idea that there's not at least one Fed handler in this particular crowd who probably muses about selling pipe bombs to the other members. Again, historically, that's just not reality. Denying that there are feds and glowies at least infiltrating such groups is clearly bogus. It's clearly bullshit. We have 100 years of historical precedent to tell us that. So, I mean, demasking going forward appears to be the only way to stop these groups from interfering with lawful political action. It appears to be the only way to prevent the legacy media from showing up, by the way, coincidentally, often when things like this happen, in order to take pictures of, oh, look at all the swastika flags at the MAGA rally. We see this with DeSantis events. We see this with Trump events. We've seen it for fucking years. We see it anytime two or more people with a MAGA hat are gathered. Somebody skitters up and practically jogs in front of the news cameras behind them, waving a swastika and shouting about how much they love Hitler or something like that. And some of them are feds. Others are just political extremists, admittedly. The idea that there aren't actual literal Nazis, yeah, they exist. Most of them are too busy in their trailer cooking meth. They're too busy. They're too stoned in order to drive to the event, in order to false flag MAGA as being a neo-Nazi movement. The way the Nazis having been socialists. If you look at the former alt-right, by the way, and there was no glowing going on there, you'll find a lot of people who have converted into hard leftism lately over the last half-decade. You'll find that once they realized that MAGA populism actually was not a neo-Nazi movement and was not amenable to destroying the economy and, digging up Adolf's skull and trying to clone him and stuff like that, you'll find that they very quickly, they were sad that they didn't get their way, despite the fact that they were always a smaller component of that populistic movement. I tried to make this clear several times, and I get called a Fed shill sometimes for pointing it out. waving swastika flags and Sieg Heiling and stuff is not going to build a pragmatic political movement or a social movement capable of actually running a country, hell, let alone running a goddamn town. Those ideologies, therefore, that do seek genuine reform and are pragmatic about how to obtain it, are tarnished as Nazi movements. It's very, very coincidental, again, that the news van always seems to arrive around that time. I guess this time it was just somebody recording it with a phone. CNN, the driver got drunk and had to sleep it off, I suppose. They missed a real hot take. Probably the legacy media, when it talks about this at all, they won't say, hey, Fedboys got demasked and beaten down by a bunch of civnats and libertarians. No, that's not what they'll say. They'll say, look at how violent MAGA is. They're devolving into infighting. Or something like that. The feds have proven that infighting exists within populism. Clearly, this is evidence we need a further crackdown, more censorship, and more neoliberalism. Yay, let's start a war. It's basically their selling point at this point. That's about all. Peace out.